How difficult it is to make the claim?
I think that just the biggest issue is sellers don't have time, right?
Is there any chance that we can do a claim or get at least a refund?
Imagine that'll go away one day, but at the current moment, it's still a thing.
What about the carrier side?
Sellers can be doing the exact same thing if you have the skills and the abilities to do it.
So how can sellers be prepared for those changes, for the refund reimbursements?
Ecom Squeezed podcast.
Welcome to Ecom Squeezed. I am your host, Sebastian, founder of Retail-Outsource. And today we are discussing a topic that many sellers overlook, but definitely they shouldn't. If you are selling on Amazon FBA, you might be leaving thousands of dollars on the table without even realizing it. That's where our guest today, Richard Dubecki, comes in. Richard is the founder of Refund Pros, a company that helps Amazon seller recover money from FBA errors. We are going to break down how you can get the refunds from lost inventory, overcharged fees, and more basically, how to put money back in your pocket. Richard, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Seb. Thanks for having me, and look forward to having this discussion and letting sellers know what they're entitled to. Really quick correction there. I'm actually the sales and marketing manager at Refund Pros. I wish I founded the company. That would be great. But our founders are Peter and Vanessa Green. It's actually a husband and wife duo. Originally, they came from the United Kingdom, right where you're from. I moved to Canada about 15 years ago. Peter's actually been developing software for over 25 years, and we started out kind of doing some shipping carrier stuff and transitioned into the Amazon space and never really looked back after that.
Well, that's great to know. So could you just give us some background on Refund Pros, how it started and how you got involved as well?
Yeah, for sure. So Refund Pros was founded in 2016. It originally came, so we started looking at shipping carrier auditing, primarily Canada Post here in Canada. And Peter was, building software on his own. It was Software Modelers Corporation, just building different pieces of software for different companies. And one of his clients approached him and said, hey, you know what, Peter, I'm having a ton of difficulty tracking my shipments, my e-commerce shipments, and getting refunds. And I know there's refunds available. Like, can you build me a piece of software? So he went to this customer and was like, hey, you know what, this seems like it's going to be pretty expensive for what you might get back. So let me call around. Let me see if there's other business owners in a similar position to you that could utilize a piece of software like this. So Peter tasked Vanessa, his wife, to start calling around businesses saying, hey, A, are you aware that you're entitled to refunds? And B, have you done anything in the past to claim these? And what we quickly realized was many business owners had no idea that they were even entitled to refunds and hence weren't ever doing anything. So Peter and Vanessa started using their 25 years of software development background to start building software that can utilize the API of carriers, identify those late shipments, and provide a service to get those refunds back without them having to do anything. Fast forward a few years, our client base, I think we registered 400 or 500 carrier clients. We're really, really good kind of building that business up. But many of those customers were saying, hey, we also have an Amazon account and there's reimbursements that are entitled, I know I'm entitled to there. Can you help us with that? So we're like, well, let's look into it. Let's see if we can do it. We have, software, we have the tools available to get this back. Started doing some research, realized that, the software that we had developed for the carrier stuff could easily be used on the Amazon side of things. And then kind of COVID hit. So all the carriers all across the world, literally overnight, turned off the tap and said, no more refunds. So we went from having, that couple hundred customer base bringing in really good revenue to nothing overnight. So it's all right, well, we've been looking at this Amazon stuff. Let's go in. We don't have any carrier refunds to claim anymore. So let's work with Amazon sellers. Kind of fast forward to now, 2025, and Amazon is actually 3 times the size of our carrier business.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at today. Obviously, a lot of the Amazon changes that have happened with regards to reimbursements over the past, basically since July of last year has, made us really rethink and pivot and try to find new opportunities. And it's really exciting for us because we get to explore different opportunities and, coming out of COVID where literally overnight our revenue was super strong and went to zero, pivoting, trying to find new things. Now obviously revenue is going to take a hit with Amazon reimbursements. Sellers are going to feel the same pain. And now it's pivoting, finding the next opportunity, and growing and being even more successful moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And you were right. So many changes from Amazon side. It's very hard to keep a track of them, right? I will ask some question, for that topic. But before we start, I just want to ask what is Amazon FBA reimbursement? For the viewers, they don't know. Most of them they might not know. So let's start with some basic on what is it basically.
Yeah, for sure. So for an FBA seller, there are, over a dozen different types of reimbursements that they can be claiming back from Amazon when issues happen with their inventory. So either lost inventory, damaged inventory, incorrect fees. So this is pick and pack fees, referral fees, storage fees. There's issues when sellers are removing inventory from Amazon where they maybe don't get that inventory back. They can claim certain reimbursements for that. There's issues with customer returns. So if Amazon's issuing the end customer a refund for a damaged piece of inventory, the seller needs to get that inventory back. If they don't get the inventory back and they never receive it, then technically Amazon shouldn't be giving the end consumer a refund. So if the seller never receives that inventory back, there's potential reimbursement claims, and the list goes on and on. I can share a little bit later our back end portal, which kind of lays out some of them in a list, so your viewers can kind of get a better idea of the breadth of reimbursements.
And you mentioned there are a dozen type of refunds, right?
Yeah.
So in your experience, do you have in general terms, what will be the percentage or which one will be higher, which type of refund will be higher? Do you have a breakdown? Does it show that on your software, for example?
Yeah, for sure. Good question, Seb. And this kind of leads into all the changes that are happening in the Amazon reimbursement world, right? So if we were to rewind and go back to the beginning of 2024, and you were to take a pie chart of all the reimbursements that a seller gets back and kind of try to visualize, okay, where is all my money coming from? The biggest chunks of those pie back at the beginning of 2024 was lost and damaged inventory. So those two different claim types followed quickly, and again, depending on the seller, would be followed by lost inbound shipments or receiving discrepancies. Those were kind of like the top three that most sellers were getting back. Well, if you look at that number today, lost and damaged, although is still quite significant, most of it is being paid back automatically by Amazon, so sellers don't have to do the extra work to get it back, which is great. Now the changes coming in March are really going to impact that, and we can talk about that in a bit. But lost inbound shipments, receiving discrepancies, is one thing that's staying pretty steady for most sellers as the top form of revenue that they can be entitled to. And that particular reimbursement claim is never paid back automatically from Amazon because they believe they're never at fault. So there's different steps. We've actually seen some of the internal processes of Amazon approving claims like that. And it's basically like a 7-step check form that they go through to actually approve those claims, which for a seller, if you don't know what those steps are, it can be really, really difficult to have successful claims, which leads to frustration, which leads to more manpower and more time going into trying to get this money back from Amazon that you're entitled to. And at the end of the day, if you don't know what they're looking for and you don't know their check boxes, it is very, very difficult to actually recover those funds.
Yeah, and I want to ask a follow-up question on that one. So lost in inbound, right? So when we prepare an Amazon FBA shipment, we can either choose Amazon's carrier partner like UPS or DHL, or we can use our third-party services, couriers. So if I use a third party, for example, will that make it difficult to make the claim if the stock didn't arrive in the warehouse?
Yes and no. Yes, it will be more difficult, but not like it doesn't really make that big of a difference at the end of the day, which one of those ways, if you're shipping with a preferred carrier or your own LTL or your own shipping carrier. So that checklist, there's a whole section that revolves around delivery. And the first question is, did they use Amazon's preferred carrier? So, if they say yes, it's great, because what happens is when Amazon sellers use preferred carrier, book their shipping through Amazon. All of the delivery information, the tracking information, your proof of delivery and all that kind of stuff, Amazon already has it, right? If you're using your own freight forwarder or your own shipping carriers, you're going to need to provide additional documentation. So you're going to need, the proof of delivery, the bill of lading. You're going to need all of these documents to prove that your carrier picked it up, that your carrier delivered it when it was supposed to be delivered. So that it just creates more logistical concerns for some businesses. And to be completely honest with you, Seb, so many Amazon sellers are super lazy, are very disorganized. So they don't keep these documents. They don't file them accordingly or appropriately. So when issues do happen, and then you ask for hey, we need this document, and this document to file this claim and get you reimbursed. So they're like, we don't have that. We never received it. We don't know where it is. So
great.
If you're using preferred shipping, it's all kind of right there available to you.
Yeah, that's true. But in my thought mind, if you use Seller Fulfill Prime, for example, to send the shipments to the customer, Amazon will take responsibility if we use, their preferred courier, and if we buy the shipping label through Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. We are doing the same thing to send the stock to Amazon, but they're not taking responsibility. So on one side, they are taking responsibility, and on the other side, they are not taking responsibility. We have to make the claim and stuff like that. And to follow up on that topic, how difficult is to make the claim? Which one is more difficult? You said there are like a dozen of different claims that we can make, right? Which one tend to be more difficult?
Well, they're all kind of equally difficult to identify, some more than others. In terms of the workload to get a claim back, lost inbound shipments are the most difficult, right? Because they require documentation. And oftentimes Amazon will ask for additional documentation. This is particularly the case when people are buying from third-party vendors and are resellers on Amazon. Less so if you're manufacturing your own products. Because if say you've been selling the same product, you don't manufacture, you buy it from a third party or whatever it is. You've been selling that product for a year or 2 years to 3 years, whatever it might be. Amazon you can file a claim, be like, hey, here's, there was 200 units of this cup missing and I want a reimbursement for that. Amazon's like, well, we want you to provide us with the last year of invoices you have for that product. Whereas a manufacturer, it's I have 200 units missing. Well, it's I just manufactured those. I made them myself. So you don't need to prove that you've owned that product for a year. So
got it.
Yeah, so to answer your question, the lost inbound or the receiving discrepancies is the most work. Stuff like lost and damaged, there's actually sections within Amazon's portal where you can go in, you can put the units that you think you're missing. Amazon has it pretty much automated on the back end where if there's there's a discrepancy in the reports, they just approve the claim and you're kind of off to the races. Same thing with fee adjustments and requesting QB scans for, readjustments and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's pretty straightforward to actually file the claims. You don't need documentation. You don't need to follow up with Amazon a lot of the times. I think the biggest issue is sellers don't have time, right? They don't have time to dig into reports. You're managing inventory levels. You're looking for the next product to sell on Amazon. You're managing PPC campaigns. You probably have stuff going on inside your business that you have to deal with. So reimbursements is just kind of something that's there, but maybe not a top priority.
That's very true. Amazon have this new policy coming in place, right? You will only get the cost price.
Yeah.
So how does it apply for the lost inbound shipments? Is that the same thing or does it have a different policy for that?
So to be honest, we're not 100% certain if it's going to apply to lost inbound, because if you actually read the news release, it says for items in FBA warehouses. So if it goes out to a customer, for instance, the returns, that's not going to apply to that. But we are working under the assumption that come March 10th, lost inbound, lost damage, you will only be receiving the cost of goods for your reimbursements. So kind of going back to our previous discussion, right, about, the impact and how much money can somebody get back and where they're going to see this from, going back, 2024, a seller who is selling let's say go back to a cup for $30. They were probably getting, a 20% probably a $25 reimbursement. So the product minus the fees and all that kind of stuff. If they manufacture that cup for $1.50, that's what Amazon's going to pay them come March 10th, not $25.
Yeah. So they're going to avoid all this, the cost, for example, the shipping cost, all the cost, the landing cost is not been taken account, right? That means
nothing, just the cost of goods. So there's no labor, there's no shipping, there's no fees, there's no duties, nothing. It's your
that will be bummer for sellers then. The cost price paying from China, it's always will be really cheap, right? The landing cost will be more reasonable, I think, what Amazon should go with.
Yeah, and Amazon's actually has like a section in their portal right now where you can go in and you can adjust your cost of goods. So they'll give you an estimate of what they think your product's worth, and you can make adjustments on that, right? So if you don't, for some sellers, what we're seeing is what they're estimating is actually more than what their cost of goods is. So if that's the case, just leave it.
Yeah.
Don't make any adjustments because you're going to come out ahead. If it's less than your cost of goods, you can make small adjustments to that. If you just you don't want to provide your documents to Amazon, just make small adjustments, see what you can do. But at a certain point, so say your cost of goods is $28, right? And then you're like, nope, my cost of goods is $40. Well, that $12 difference, Amazon's going to ask for documentation, right? So you're going to need to be, as a seller, to provide your manufacturing cost, where you're buying your products, like where exactly are they coming from, and that amount of data is so powerful for Amazon. Specifically,
I can see that being misused a big time.
Yeah.
On that follow-up question, do you think that Amazon, they have automated all this system now, right? Going forward, the refunding. So should sellers do something from their end?
In what regards?
With the new.
Well, again, it's like one of those things you have to look at your cost of goods, right? Like make sure you know what those are, make sure you know what you're getting back. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm going to say using reimbursement companies for monitoring stuff, making sure you're getting back fair value for what you're entitled to, and being able to find everything that you're entitled to, right? Not just, a few things here and there. Many sellers believe, they have internal processes, they feel like they're getting everything. But what happens is when they get an audit and see their, the total account health, they realize that there's money going missing. And, these policy changes are going to be really, really big, and it's going to, shift the Amazon marketplace a little bit, because sellers who have really big margins, the policy is really not going to affect it that much, right? Like their margins are going to drop a little bit, but they're going to be fine. The sellers that are going to be impacted are the ones that are already working on like razor thin margins, right? Because like historically, a seller could get back reimbursements that equal 1 to 3% of their entire annual revenue. Like that's what they were getting back every year, and that makes a huge impact for those sellers whose margins are very thin. Well, now you take that 1 to 3%, and it's probably going to be like 0.5%, if not less. Far less. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah. That's great. Richard, I want to ask you this question. What's the highest amount that you got from the Amazon FBA refunds?
Yeah.
For the time that you've been working there?
Yeah, so there's two cases that stand out, and they were both like lost inbound shipment cases where an entire pallet of products didn't show up either time. The one claim was $197,000.
Wow.
For a single claim.
Should be an expensive SKU then.
It was a like breastfeeding like pump for a company. So it was like the whole shipment didn't show up. And there was one other claim that wasn't quite as big. I think it was like $123,000. And it was a whole shipment of supplements that didn't show up.
Wow, that's a huge amount. And most of the sellers will ignore that part, right? The refund side. They will think, okay, it's all automated. I will get refund anyways.
Yeah. So those cases were actually, if you like look in your reports, it would be they were closed shipments. So basically what happened was Amazon did their investigation and they said, yep, you know what, this never happened, this never existed, we're just closing the shipment. And then we look through that and we're like, talking to our clients, be like, hey, they they close the shipment. Did you actually send? They're like, yeah, we actually sent that. So then you open the case, and even though Amazon's done their investigation, there was an opportunity to recover 6 figures for those customers.
True. And for this refunds, you mentioned about the inbound, right? For the inbound, if the shipment is lost, for example, this is kind of a cheeky one though. Can you claim it from the carrier as well? You mentioned that you were working with carriers also before.
Yeah.
So if you have an insurance, can we do that as well? Because from Amazon going forward, you're not going to get the full amount, right? So can we do something on the carrier side?
So yes and no. If you're using Amazon's preferred shipping, right? So basically you're paying Amazon for the shipping, right? So if you want to go after your shipping carriers for lost items, so say maybe it's insurance or whatever it might be, you're going to have to be using your own shipping account, your own shipping credentials. It's going to have to be bought by you, not paying like Amazon, buying your labels from Amazon, because at the end of the day, then that's Amazon shipment. That's not your shipment as a seller. So with different carriers, most carriers come with like a basic $100 insurance is like your like kind of starting point for most shipments. And then you have to like pay extra, I don't know exactly, it differs by carrier, an extra couple dollars for every $100. So say you have a pallet of, $100,000 worth of product that you're sending in. Well, you have to pay the appropriate amount of insurance to claim that. If it goes missing, then you can go after the carrier for that whole lost shipment. Now, what we're finding and what we see is a lot of times it is extremely painful and extremely difficult to try to get carriers to actually refund insurance, specifically for like large losses. They don't do a good job of taking accountability for those losses. That being said, it's possible.
And can we get at least the money that you paid for the carrier for the shipment, for example? Not the full amount for the stock, just for the carrier. Can we get that? Or because they didn't do maybe it shows us delivered on the tracking, then we can say, they will not take responsibility. But if any other cases, is there any chance that we can do a claim or get at least a refund?
Yeah. Really, it depends on the shipping service that you're paying for, right? So depending on what shipping service you're paying for, most shipping carriers right now, so like the UPS, FedEx, DHL of the world, if you're shipping just like standard ground, so you're sending small parcels, shipping standard ground, right now there's no refunds. They suspended those, and they're still blaming COVID. Imagine that'll go away one day, but at the current moment, it's still a thing. Within Canada. So if you were spending, if you're shipping your products to, customers in Canada using any one of their services, including their just regular expedited service, they guarantee everything. You get a full refund for a late delivery. With FedEx, if you're shipping anything overnight, 100% refund if it's 60 seconds late, which is, really good. Most businesses I talk to don't have the ability to spend the extra money on kind of the overnight, or with UPS, it's express shipping. The cost difference between ground and express, if you can get back 5% of your shipping cost because something's late, still doesn't really equal it at the end of the day.
Richard, my next question is that, before as a seller, we used to download the report from Amazon and open a case to get each refund, and the process was really lengthy, right? What's changing from March 10?
So not a whole lot is changing in the way you're going to submit and file the reimbursements. It's more how they're paying it. Like that's the biggest change, is how they're paying it. Obviously, the changes that occurred in October for US sellers, and January for UK and EU sellers, of things just being processed automatically, is great, right? Like all loss, all damage is just being paid to you. And what we're finding is Amazon is doing a fantastic job of actually paying that back automatically. And we're only seeing anywhere between like 5 and 10% of all cases not being paid if you wait the appropriate kind of 60-day window. So for sellers, if you're really just focused on lost and damage, you don't even have to download the reports. You don't have to do any of that. They're just going to do it for you automatically. But it's kind of that good, bad, good sandwich, right? It's like, hey, guess what? We're going to pay you back automatically. Seller's like, yes, that's awesome. I should, at the end of the day, should have been doing it anyways.
Yeah.
And then they're like, by the way, we're only going to pay you COGS. And seller's like, damn it. It's like,
Yeah.
no, like this is killing my business. And then literally the next day, Amazon's like, but we're not raising your fees this year. And
Yeah.
seller's like, oh, great, no fees. Well, that kind of makes up. So it's like trying to distract and really kind of squeeze in. And there's a reason why. Like Seb, like think about it. Like, why do you think Amazon, took that approach and is now paying people COGS? Like, why do you think they're doing that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so it's to get the supply information most likely, and they have reduced the claim window as well, right? The time period. So, what was the time period before, and what's going to change? What's the time period now, for example?
Yeah, so for like lost and damaged inventory removal orders, prior to the most recent policy changes, it was 18 months, right? A year and a half, a seller could go back. So if a seller was kind of dragging their feet, these issues were happening now and again, they had some time to go in. And that's where, businesses like Refund Pros, we really benefited because we could use our software and easily go back 18 months, identify those issues, and get people money back within 24 hours. It's like, if you hadn't been claiming stuff, that's, 6-7 figures of revenue basically overnight. Well, now it's, for those same claims, it's 60 days, right? And I don't know about you, Seb, but 60 days goes by really fast for me.
Yeah, that's very true. For a seller, that's like tack finish, and you might be engaged in something else, for example.
Yeah, and it's not 60 business days, it's 60 days.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. I think a lot of sellers are going to miss out on claiming. Some of them will be automatically reimbursed, but a lot, as you just mentioned, will be missed out. And for those sellers who never done anything on their account, what will be your comment to them?
I think it's just get some help, right? Like just have somebody, it doesn't matter if it's a Refund Pros, and like Gitita, whatever, like whoever you feel most comfortable working with, is like just get somebody in and have, most companies in our space will audit your account for free. We'll show you what's available to you. If you've been managing processes in-house for a while, we can provide reports and information to say, hey, that's great, you've been claiming stuff, but you've been doing it this way, and you've been missing check marks, and you've been missing those, we often see is cases getting closed and unresolved because either a company has opened a case and Amazon's asked for stuff and the seller never provided them with the additional follow-up. So Amazon just closes the case. They say, hey, you got 4 days to give me some information. If you don't do that, we're just going to close the case. And many sellers are oblivious to the fact that, like, as soon as they open a case, with they provide documentation, say they provide a BOL and they provide a POD and a packing slip. And they're like, okay, my job here is done. Case should be paid in no time. And if they don't log in for a week, well, Amazon's replied to them and said, hey, thank you for submitting this case, but we need X, Y, and Z. And the seller never sees that. Amazon closes the case, and then you lose that revenue.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of roadblocks in between. A lot of chances that you miss out on that one because the case will close in like 24 hours and stuff like that. So those are silly stuff actually. For a seller to miss it, the chances are really high, right? And for the viewers, I'm not sure if you can share the screen and show how the system works, how the workflow is, and how the dashboard looks like. For example, if you can show that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So this here is just. Let me know if you can see it. If it's good.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is just a very, very basic demo of our kind of customer portal. You can see it's just kind of a demo account, but here is kind of a list of all of the reimbursements that we cover for. So damaged in warehouse, damaged inbound, destroyed without permission. This is referral fees, storage fees, lost in warehouse, receiving discrepancies, returns, unpaid. Like, there's lots and lots and lots, and as well as vendor shortages. So any viewers out there that are also selling 1P or an Amazon vendor, there's 3 different claim types that you can be claiming on the vendor side. So there's shortages, there are co-op fees and chargebacks. All are great sources of revenue, and most Amazon 1P sellers or vendors can claw back about 5% of their average sales. So, for us, do the work within Seller Central. So there's nothing really to share with you because Refund Pros utilizes Amazon's web services. We use our proprietary software to go in with the permissions you give us to audit your reports, find the claims. Once we go ahead and submit the claims and they're approved, they show up here in the portal, a Refund Pros dashboard. So you'll get your seller ID. So, we have sellers that have, 4 or 5 seller IDs and different stores, different products, and they just kind of sync them all to the one Refund Pros account. So you got like, your seller ID, your reimbursement ID, case ID, the type. A lot of times you'll see the reimbursed amount and then the reimbursed per unit amount. So like, this is going to change significantly after March 10th. So the reimbursed per unit amount is, some of these units here, that used to be $107 might be $20 now. And then you'll be able to see like the SKUs, the ASINs, and it's all kind of exportable to CSV. Many sellers like to export their stuff, and what they do is try to get a better idea. So for instance, if it's a receiving discrepancy and it's always a certain SKU, so say they have 1,000 SKUs, but it's always one that goes missing in transport. Well, then they can kind of figure out what's going on with that particular SKU to make the appropriate changes to hopefully reduce those issues in the future. In terms of how we work at Refund Pros, we try to work as best with the seller as possible. So, we can get people to come in here if they want to like bulk upload documents for like PODs, BOLs, and so forth. There'll be like a list of claims here if we identify stuff. Most sellers, though, just like to work on an email basis with their case manager. So that's kind of one thing that really separates us is every single one of our clients gets a case manager to work on their account. They know their account. They know what their invoices look like. They know what their packing slips look like. For manufacturers, we can do the work of, helping them build some packing slips, making sure that everything is in accordance with Amazon's policies, and making sure that they be like, hey, yes, this is valid. This is true. We actually shipped what we shipped. We also provide just some basic summaries. And then on the carrier side, like I said, we've been doing the carrier stuff since 2016. So our like reporting suite for the carriers is pretty in depth. We have like overall summary reports. You can compare your total spend, so the percentage of spend versus what's refunded, your expenses by carriers. You can see the percentage of shipments late per carrier. So if you're shipping with UPS and DHL and you're sending, say, 100 parcels with each carrier in a given month, you can sort that. You can see which carrier performs better and then maybe shift some of your shipments over to that carrier to help you speed up delivery times, which is very, very, very important when you're looking at like D2C shipping because you're competing with Amazon, basically. Yeah. If Amazon, my wife regularly orders stuff on Saturday night at 10 p.m. and we live in the interior of British Columbia, so that the closest warehouse is 4 hours away in Langley. But she'll order at 10 p.m. on a Saturday and it'll be at our door by 9 a.m. on Sunday. Wow. It's like...
It's quite fast.
It's like, okay, like, first of all, how did they do that? Amazon is amazing, right? Just their whole ecosystem, what they do and what they provide to sellers is incredible.
Great.
But at the same time, like sellers' margins are really thin. And I would imagine most sellers who have an e-commerce business and they ship products already would rather customers just buy directly from them.
Yeah.
But the thing is a delivery window is, 3 to 7 days, not 8 hours.
Yeah. And so on that software, you can, as you mentioned, you can upload a CSV file or you can link Amazon via API, right? So there are 2 methods that we can upload the file.
Yeah. So for us, like we need access to Seller Central. So you would go in, you would invite us as a user and then set 6 permissions. Once the permissions are set, we utilize Amazon Web Services to run our audits using their API. Once we've identified claims, we go ahead and do the work. If there is a lost inbound shipment or receiving discrepancy, you as a seller could have, all your documents just in one kind of spot. You can literally take all your documents and just be like, upload all. And then we will go through and we'll find what we need to file those claims. Once the claims are started, you see those green claims and everything's been paid. What you can do is you can sort by a month, a year, a week, whatever it is. You can export all that data to a CSV and do some internal analysis. So you can look and be like, hey, listen, this SKU number, every single time I send a shipment to Amazon, units go missing. So is it the way I'm packaging it? Is it the way I'm labeling it? Like, you can try to figure out what's going on to help reduce those issues and reduce those losses in the future, which is going to help save you money, make you more profitable, and make selling on Amazon that much smoother.
Great. And I think you have some USPs for your website, for the carrier claiming, right? I think most of the other carriers, companies like Getida, for example, they don't have that function to claim the carrier's refund. So for example, if I'm a seller and if I'm doing FBA and if I'm doing FBM also on the side to fill, for example, on website orders, so can I integrate that to the website and get, check, same like Amazon refunds, can I make that claims as well?
Yeah, for sure. So again, going back to earlier point is as long as you're shipping your FBM orders with your own carriers. So say if you're located in the United States, you're selling FBA, but then you also have your FBM and you're sending your FBM shipments out with FedEx. And you're using your own FedEx account to fulfill those orders. You can sync up your FedEx account with Refund Pros. We'll audit all your shipments every single night. If anything is eligible for a late shipment refund, we can go ahead and get that back for you. We can also look for like address corrections, fuel surcharges, incorrect fuel surcharges, Saturday delivery or wrong delivery fees. If your product requires a signature in the US, it's kind of like a lot of like firearms or, any sort of weaponry stuff. There's usually a signature required. If the carrier is delivering that and they don't get a signature, but you've paid for that, you can get a refund for that service that you paid for. And there's a few other different type of scenarios where you as a seller could be claiming refunds.
Richard, I think for the FBA refunds, it's around 1 to 3%, right? I heard somewhere you mentioning that. And what about the carrier side? Is there any percentage that you have normally, how much you can get refund, for example?
Yeah, so historically, most e-commerce businesses can recover 5 to 20% of their entire shipping expenses every single year. Now, the caveat is really depends on what shipping services you're using, right? So if you're, like I mentioned with Canada Post, it's great because if you're shipping in Canada, and many businesses utilize that service, everything you ship with them, if you're a business, qualifies for a full refund. So if you pay $15 to ship a product and it's 1 day late, you get $15 back and the product goes to the customer. With like UPS and FedEx, you really have to be using some of their more preferred shipping options. DHL, it's kind of the same way. But that being said, there's all those other little fees that can add up. So if you kind of look at it as a whole, our customer base usually sees between 5 and 20% of their entire shipping expenses annually refunded to them. And the cool thing about the carrier stuff with Refund Pros, it's entirely set and forget for a business. Unlike Amazon with lost amount shipments where documentation and all that stuff is required. For carriers, you literally create your account, which takes less than 2 minutes. We audit, we submit the claims, carriers pay them back directly. There's no operational changes required, which is pretty cool for many business owners. Like one of the first things that most business owners, when they're looking at onboarding any sort of third party, be it a reimbursement company or a software or a marketing team, is what's my team going to need to do? How much extra work is this for me?
Yeah.
And, that's a really huge decision point for a lot of businesses.
And I assume you only support Canada and US at the moment, right, for the carrier side?
No, we can, as long as you're shipping with any one of the major carriers, it doesn't matter where you're located.
All right.
The API is all the same.
All right. Okay. So, for example, in the UK, you can claim, UPS, all those carriers as well, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
What?
I never thought about it.
In the UK, what's the primary carrier? Because I know like in the US it's UPS and FedEx. In Canada it's like Canada Post. In the UK, like what's your biggest
So
carrier?
if you want to send small parcels, it's always Royal Mail, small parcels and up to first class 24 hours, it's up to 5 kilos. And for like big boxes, like up to 20 kilos, it's a DPD always. Then it will be UPS after that. So in that range, DPD is kind of the number one. And
Gotcha.
they are very good at innovating stuff. Like, they have a time slot for the delivery and they will inform you. You can see the driver coming, same like Amazon deliveries. So,
Yeah. So
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 DPD will
like
be the number
like
one.
an Amazon FBM seller in the UK, are they utilizing that shipping service?
Yeah, so for if you're Amazon FBM seller, and if you want to buy a shipping through Amazon, the first option will be DPD or Royal Mail, and there'll be a third option called Airway. They are quite rubbish actually, but those are the number one option because it's very slow.
Yeah.
If you just type it on TikTok, you can see the driver throwing the stuff in the garden and stuff like that, putting that in the bin, and the bin man it's a whole
Yeah.
story behind it actually. So it's quite
Yeah.
funny.
That's good for Amazon sellers in the UK to know. So don't choose that.
Yeah, never choose that. And my next question will be, we have a lot of AI things happening, right? How can we integrate AI for the refunds, if possible? Do you have any system in place to do that?
So I mentioned earlier before we started recording, I'm really good at skirting around things. So I can let you know, Seb, is that we've been using AI now for probably a year and a half for some of our internal processes. One thing that's really important to us is we don't outsource any work. Our entire team is located in our office in downtown Kelowna, whereas like other companies will outsource to cheaper labor markets across the world. And we know that like it's really hard to compete with that. So that the best way to do is kind of use AI tools. Now, if you're an Amazon seller with a really great development team and you can create processes using AI, go for it. I highly recommend if you have the skills and abilities, there are ways to, scan reports for claims and so forth with AI. You can even look what Elon's doing in the US, right? Hiring people to gather all the government documentations and use AI to see where they can cut cost reductions.
Yeah.
Sellers can be doing the
Those,
exact same thing if you have the skills and the abilities to do it. That would be my kind of answer to that is if you have the team.
true. And Miss, I think it's you need that human touch for the refund reimbursements, right? Because loss inbound and those are kind of things that AI will not pick up unless you have like very expert coding and you have put all those knowledge inside that custom GPT, for example. It's very hard, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah,
You
and
need
there's
that
there's
human touch.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like the AI is good to a certain point, right? So AI is good for identifying the issues or helping you kind of figure out what's going on or maybe ways to solve the issues. So like you can go to ChatGPT and ask them like, how do I file my claim more efficiently and what do I need? And it'll provide you the documentation. A lot of the like carriers, for instance, and Amazon, like there are policies in place that say you can't utilize stuff like that. And we take that very seriously. So we don't utilize AI to actually like file the claims, submit the claims, and because that would go against the policies, which would then put sellers at risk. So just be as a seller, if you're planning on utilizing AI, just make sure you know how you're utilizing that, so you're not going against any policies. You're not putting your account health in jeopardy. Specifically for people who that's where your bread is butter. That's where your business is. You can't put it at risk just to save a few hours using AI.
Yeah, exactly. And my last question will be a lot of things are changing now, right? So, how can sellers be prepared for those changes, for the refund reimbursements?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, Seb, is just be aware of your business, right? Like really, really know your margins and just keep an eye on everything because we've seen it over the years, right? There's sellers who focus so heavily on revenue. It's like how many sales am I doing? How much, what am I pushing? What am I like? How much money am I making? But at the end of the day, their profit margins are so thin. And if these reimbursements, that 1 to 3% was like your profit margin and now it's going away, really evaluate if it's worth it, right? Is it worth selling on Amazon? If my profit margin was 2%, and you were getting 2% of your reimbursements back every year, even 2% profit margin on $100 million business, that's pretty good. But if that goes away, is it feasible to start selling? So, my advice would just be like, make sure you know your margins. Make sure your account is healthy, your business is healthy, and try to diversify. Now, I know this conversation is all about Amazon and relying on Amazon, and that's great. Amazon's a great source, and it's a great tool for sellers to sell their products. However, if you're just relying on them, similar to what happened to Refund Pros many, many years ago with COVID, just pulling the plug, if we didn't have the ability to pivot and find something else, we wouldn't exist today. So as a seller, like, say tomorrow Amazon goes away. What are you doing? Like, what's your plan? So that would be my advice, is just look for the next thing.
Yeah, it's true. With Amazon, you never know when they're going to suspend your account, right? Suddenly, no matter if you are selling 100 million, or whatever, they're just going to pull it off, actually. So that's a scary thing for sellers, Amazon pulling the rug.
Yeah.
And for the viewers, do you want to offer anything for Refund Pros?
Yeah, for sure.
Any special deal or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously March 10th is, creeping up onto us very quickly. So there's still time for many sellers to get full value reimbursements, to get the full bang for their buck. So what we would absolutely love to do is offer any of your viewers, any of your subscribers, a significantly reduced commission rate. So it would be a 10% commission on the reimbursements we recover for the first 3 months of service. So that'll get us past the deadline. You'll recover everything you can. And kind of the cool thing about that is, if any of the people who get started with us prior to kind of the March 10th, you're going to get all the money, and there's no commitments or contracts or anything to hold you on. You can stay with us as long as you want. You can cancel anytime. But we really want to help support you, help support grow your business, and help you be as profitable as you possibly can be in 2025. And all you got to do is just let them know where you heard about us after you create your account. Just put that in the details box, and we'll make sure that you get that special 10% discount.
And I think that 10% is quite very, very attractive pricing. Means all the other agencies are charging much more, right? So even for 3 months, that's a steal. And I think, as Richard said, it's your time. You have limited time, right, to get full refund. So utilize it. And I will put all the links to the website and to his profile as well, to Richard's profile on the show notes. And thanks a lot, Richard, for all the valuable advice. We appreciate that.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Richard. Cheers.
Bye.